Hello everybody, Ben Garcia here coming from Cochise County, the grazing project for the water reclamation area out here. I was going to take you guys through and just kind of show you some of what we got going on here on the ground. So here we got an area that the cows have not been in at all, and you can tell that the grass is kind of up around, I don't know, 16, 18 inches in places, and then laying down and stuff. And if you look at it here, you can see that the quality is not great on like the Bermuda grass that are some of the different grasses that are in here, but then other grasses right here that are standing up down at the base, you got a little more feed value in it. I don't know if you guys can see that on the camera there. I think it's visible. These are all pretty much annual grasses that grow just in the short monsoon period that we had out here. But it keeps it going. So if we keep going, you can see it's quite a bit, pretty good stand of grass out here. And then you've also got your what we commonly call pigweed out here. And then you've got, as we cross the fence here into where the cows are. So this is the next pasture that they're going into. But here we've got where they are currently. So they've been in here 2 days, and they've been putting quite a bit of, knocking down quite a bit of carbon, putting some litter on the ground. But this is a pasture that is a split 15 acres, so 7.5 acres. And you can tell you've got areas in here that don't have any, much manure spread around. You've got these pockets of it, like here is 2 or 3 of them, and then you move on and there's areas where there's not quite as much. So they're kind of pockets of good spread and then areas where there's none. And then we've got, if you look at the grass that they're eating, they're knocking it down quite a bit, and then they've got pockets where they don't eat it, and then pockets where they really spend some time eating the candy. That's what they consider candy. To me it all looks just like dry grass right now, but what the cows are eating and getting, they seem to be gaining weight on it. So when they first went into winter here, when the frost hit, they seemed to lose a little bit of weight, but they're gaining now, picking back up. And if we keep going, this is across that 7.5 acres. It's fairly thin but really long all the way down that way. If we cross the fence here, so going across the 15 acres, you notice that they ate more. They don't, to me it doesn't look like, I mean these are just observations, there's not as much litter on the ground. More pockets have been eaten out, and then you've got the stands like this of a little bit taller grass still sitting there with some of it knocked down. And you've got these bunch grasses that they haven't really touched, leave standing, and then they got areas where they ate it out. And here you notice, so there's this whole area, you've got 2 or 3 cow manure piles right there, and then you got this big area, no cow manure piles. And then you've got 2 here, and then if you keep walking, one small one, another small one, and you keep walking, there's just none, little one there. And then a little bit larger trails. You notice got one deep trail, and over here there's just no trails. But just my observations, when they're in these bigger pastures, they start really cutting in these deeper trails, and you've got one here, one there, and they're kind of spread out and deeper. So in this pasture there was quite a bit of the annual pigweed in here, which has no feed value right now, so they don't really touch it, but they are knocking it down. And it kind of looks like there was some fairly loamy soil out here, so they were definitely moving it around, and there's some gophers out here working the ground. pretty good. But in this area here, it don't even look like they were in here much. The impact is definitely not as high when they're in these larger areas. They look like they might, just observation-wise, impact, I don't know, 80% of the pasture, maybe less. I guess in pockets, they're definitely catching it. In other areas, it seems like they might have passed through once or twice. One cow did. But it's definitely not as high an impact when you shrink them up. And here we've got another one of those trails. I don't know if you can see it real well, but it's definitely got some impact on it. It's even walking on it is definitely harder than the surrounding areas, so that definitely is different. When you got these bigger pastures, they spend 5 days out there, 5 or 6 days in the 15 acres, and it creates some high impact areas, but it's almost like impact, not quite like the impact that we want. And then we come along, this is where we cross the fence into the 2.8 acres that we had here. And within this 2.8 acres is where we split it up into 8-hour sections. So we had the paddock sections. So we had 8 hours, 8 hours, and 8 hours in this 2.8 acre paddock. And we'll see if there's what kind of impact we were seeing in here. So we've got, the trails, there's like, one thing I've noticed is you do have trails, but it's like a trail, a trail, a trail, a trail. So their impact is spread out a little bit more. You don't got one single trail that they continually walk on. And then you've also got, like here we've got 4 manure piles, and 1, 2, 3, 4 manure piles, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 manure piles, 7, and you got more. You do have a little space here with none, but then you've got more manure. Right here's manure. You've got 4 piles here, 4 piles here, 1 here. So it definitely is a lot more manure spread when you're in these smaller paddocks, or I guess you should say the higher density in the smaller paddock with the 8 hours moves. To me, it just appears visually that you've got more manure consistently spread around, and definitely that most of the debris is knocked down. Most of the grass is knocked down and driven into the ground, and they do have it eaten off quite a bit as well in areas. And then if we come over here, this crossing the fence into the area that was split in half, so 2.8 acres with 12-hour moves. So here you did have a little bit more of the trails that they would create, and that could, some of this could be because we got trees here, so there's only one way to get around it. But you still have trails split up a little bit more, and then the manure spread is quite good. Still do got some stands of this cotton top grass that we have in here, but the manure, 2.8 acres, but you've got a little bit more grass in here, but you've also got different grasses and different densities in different places, so it's hard to make a complete judgment call right now. I guess next year when we come back through here after monsoons, we'll possibly be able to see an impact in some of these areas, how it was different. So I do like how the cows made some pretty good indentions and breaking the capping here on these areas that have bare dirt. Here it must be quite a bit harder because they're barely touching it in the center, but along the edges where the grasses are, where they spend a little bit more time, they definitely break up the capping, which hopefully spreads seeds, and next year when it rains, grass will sprout in those areas, and we will shrink this bare area hopefully in half. That would be fantastic if we were able to do that. What would be really good is if we had some bale grazing done on these areas. Look at the erosion differences in this area. You've got almost 4 or 5 inches of difference between this bare dirt here and that stand of grass. Goes up 4 or 5 inches. Grass is growing. Here it's gradual, but it drops another 3 inches, 4 inches. So you definitely could hold water in these areas, but just that capping is not allowing the grass and the water to get down in there. So hopefully these impact areas will grow grass and shrink these a third to half. Would be fantastic. I don't know if it'll happen in 1 year, but we can be hopeful. As we come up on this one, this is a 2.8 acre move that they spent the same amount of time on. This one was also split in a 12 hour period. I mean, just me visually looking at it, it don't appear that there's much manure spread, even when you split it in half, 12-hour periods. But it's hard to really tell because different grasses are bringing them to different areas in there. And it did rain in this one, so we did have some mud impact. But they didn't really damage it because they were only in here, this area, for 1 day. Actually 12 hours they were in this area. And then if we come over here, this is about where we're in 2.8 acres. But this was done in a 24-hour period. So they were in this 2.8 acres in a total of 24 hours. And we did have some water.